DJI sent me their Mini 3 Pro a few weeks ago for me to try it out. On paper it looks really attracting. The weight is just under 250 grams, 4K up to 60 frames per second, an almost log profile, D-Cine-like, and above all the ability to turn the camera to vertical and film or take photos directly in vertical. How does it really look and feel on the ground, and who's it for? We're gonna see all of that in under 10 minutes in this video. Before properly beginning the review, I just wanted to let you know that I'm French, as you can probably hear, and I have a main channel which is in French, which is at almost 100k subs, but I decided to try and make an English channel. There will be content coming out, let's say, monthly, mainly reviews or videos that I can do in 2 languages. I do travel content, gear reviews, behind the scenes of all the projects that I'm working for, like some commercials, and I also often get to try out new projects before they're released. So I would love for you to just click the subscribe button. So we have a sensor that's a little bit tinier than a 1-inch sensor, like in the Mavic 2 Pro or Mavic Air 2S. We've got though a 48 megapixel camera, 24mm focal equivalent, and an aperture of f1.7, which is pretty bright. We have a newly designed gimbal with the back axis that's actually under the camera, which allows the camera to go really high, like on my favorite drone, which is the Air 2S. The camera is stuck at like 0 degrees and cannot tilt up. This one can actually film completely upwards toward the sky. I managed to actually film under a bridge and just film like properly under the bridge, but it also allows the camera to go completely vertical and shoot vertical photos or videos, which is amazing. We have 2 sensors on the front, 2 sensors on the back, and 2 sensors under the drone. So there are no sensors on the sides or on top of the drone. Just be aware of that. It's extremely lightweight, 249 grams, which is just right under the 250 mark, which makes it a lot easier for hobbyists to fly it because you have a lot less regulations. Just check your local regulations to see what this allows, but it's really practical, and in terms of weight, it's just amazing. And also, since it's really lightweight, they had to cut down on everything, especially on the material quality. So as you can hear, it's actually kind of empty. There is really nothing. It kind of feels a bit cheap, but it's for the best to reduce the weight. At the back, you got the micro SD and USB-C port, but there is no cover on it, so it wouldn't have cost much to put something on it. Batteries are extremely small. It just feels like a toy. It's 80 grams, and on paper, it's supposed to make it fly for 34 minutes, which is pretty amazing for the size of the battery and weight. So there are actually 3 packs. There's a standard pack, which is only the drone and no remote. You can actually use the remotes from previous drone, like the Air 2S, Mini 2, and a couple others. You can also get a package with this standard remote, and if you pay a bit more, you can get the new remote, which has an integrated screen. So this is really practical. You don't have to put your phone, get the cable, and via future firmware updates, you will be able to connect this remote to some other drones like the Air 2S or maybe Mini 2, but it's like in the near future, I guess. And whichever pack you choose, I would advise you to get the Fly More kit, which gives you 2 more batteries, a triple charger, and a small carrying pouch. Now let's see what it actually does on the field. So I'm mainly a filmmaker. I take photos, of course, but I'm just gonna go through quickly what it can do in photos. It's 48 megapixel. You can shoot JPEG or JPEG plus RAW, which is pretty good. The quality and dynamic range is actually pretty good. Just be aware that it doesn't always take 48 megapixels photo. It actually does pixel binning and get you 12 megapixel photos, but you have like a function to take the actual 48 megapixel. As I mentioned, the camera is able to shoot directly into vertical mode, which is pretty fine since Instagram wants to apparently make only vertical content, including photos. Great. You've got the usual modes, so panorama, burst mode in 3 or 5 photos each burst. Of course, the low light performance, whether it's in photo or video, is not great. It's a really small sensor, so 200, 400, don't go any further because you're going to see grain. So, usually when you do that, you don't have any other choice, but just be aware of that. Okay, photo is done. Now let's talk about the most interesting part for me, which is video shooting. This tiny camera is able to shoot 4K up to 60 frames per second, which is really good. So you have 2 color profiles, the normal mode and the D-Cine-like, which is not log, but it's flat. Let's say it's just flat. When I first tried it out and did like a week in the countryside to do some shots, I didn't have access because the firmware wasn't out yet. So I didn't have access to the DC-like mode, but I managed to try it out later and it's pretty good. I mean, the normal color mode will give you like a lot less dynamic range and really punchy colors, which is good just to post like as it is. But I really advise you to try out the DC-like, which gives you actually a pretty good dynamic range. So you can shoot 4K 60 frames per second, but it's compressed. It's written like not as HQ. I actually tried 4K 25 and 4K 15 because I'm in Europe side by side and I couldn't really see a difference. So there is probably a slight difference, but just it's actually fine. There's also a slow motion mode, which is 1080 120 FPS, which is good, but as always you lose quite a lot of the image quality, but for social media it's actually fine. I mean, it's usable. The main issue for me is that it's not a 1-inch sensor, so it's a bit too sharp in some details like grass, trees. That is visible to me. Maybe to some it won't be a problem, but to me this is like the main drawback, is I can actually see that it's a small sensor and it's getting mushy in the details. I couldn't get an ND filter, so I did some really quick shots following cars and stuff, but the shutter speed is really high, so you don't really feel the speed. But this is going up to 60 km/h, so it's actually pretty good. But again, the main feature, which says a lot about this drone, is that the gimbal in one tap on the screen can turn into vertical mode. That's pretty cool. Like, it's really amazing. You can get the best quality directly in vertical. You don't have to crop anymore and get some really shitty looking footage. It's quite good to fly just using the vertical camera. If you're still like me, one of the horizontal shooter, you can actually get something really interesting, which is that the camera is able to tilt up to 50 or 60 degrees up, which is actually kind of straight up, which allows for some really interesting footage. Like, you can do some hero shots. Creatively, it's pretty interesting. The aperture is fixed. You can't change the aperture. You could do that on the Mavic 2 Pro, but it's the same on the R2S, you can't change it, so it's either you move the shutter speed or ISO, but I wouldn't recommend moving the ISO. So I don't really like using the intelligent modes that are actually getting the shots for you. I tried the tracking feature. Using the sensors on the front and back, it's also able to avoid the obstacles. Tracking is good. I mean, I didn't have like the final proper firmware. It lost me sometimes, but it's mostly good and it's actually quite spot on. There is also the master shot function, which is like you just point the subject and it will do all the classical typical shots all by itself. So it takes like maybe 2 minutes and is doing all the movements one by one. The only drawback is that it's auto exposure. You're stuck in either 1080 or 4K 30 frames per second. Quality isn't as good. It's not for me, but maybe for beginners, why not? I forgot to mention, but there's also like a 2x digital zoom that you can get in 4K. Just don't use it because, well, it's getting really mushy. Not the best quality, but it's there. Just regarding the battery, so it's supposed to be flying for 34 minutes. I actually got maybe 25 minutes at best. Just for you to know, there is also like a bigger battery that's available, I think, just outside of Europe, which extends the supposed flight time to 34 minutes to 47 minutes, which is pretty amazing. But just be aware that the drone goes upwards of 250 grams because the battery is heavier. Now it's time for the conclusion. Who is this drone for? The main new feature of the drone is that it shoots vertical content. So if you're doing a lot of vertical content, TikTok, Reels, this is the drone for you. If you're someone who wants to get a pretty nice high quality drone, but you don't want to have a really heavy backpack, you don't want it to take too much space in your bag or in your suitcase, well, this is the drone for you. It's also really good for beginners if you have the budget. It's not like 400 bucks, it's maybe more in the 700-800 bucks. If you're really into cinematography and you really want the highest quality, of course this drone may not be for you because, well, this isn't the highest quality drone. It's maybe go for the drones with the 1-inch sensor or even the Micro Four Thirds, which is the Mavic 3. Please don't forget to like, comment, and of course subscribe, because I really need like a few subscribers to get the channel going. I will see you in the next one. Ciao.